So, all right. Hi, everyone. Looks like we've just started the webinar and we've got folks filling into the room. Welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute as we get people settled and signed in. And we're really excited to have you all. I see some really familiar names in the chat. Really great to see y'all. Or in the chat in the attendee list. Welcome. All right. Well, okay, people are really filling in fast, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started because we've got a lot to discuss. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessica Wilkinson, and I'm an economic development researcher at RTI International. RTI International is responsible for running the community of practice for Build Back Better Regional Challenge awardees. So we run the Building Better Regions Community of Practice, which creates in-person and virtual opportunities for members to share their experiences. Oh, okay. I see a chat in the. Can other folks just go ahead and chat if they're able to hear us? Okay, great. Thank you. Angie, it might be an audio problem. Okay, wonderful. Um, all right. So yes, so community practice, we celebrate or we facilitate development and dissemination of these new ideas. The community of practice provides opportunities for members to learn from each other, test and pilot emerging tools and strategies for increasing economic health and competitiveness within our communities. Wanted to just go ahead and give folks the opportunity and encourage people to introduce themselves in the chat. This is a webinar format, so we can't all see each other. It's just participants and speakers who are able to be highlighted on video, but we can chat each other. And so I would encourage everyone to put your name, your title, your location in the chat, anything else you want to share with the group. Quick overview of the webinar format. Like I said, the chat is live. We also have a Q&A function. And so you'll be able to see at the bottom of the screen, you can submit questions to the participants, and we'll be monitoring the chat as well as the Q&A function. Participants, the speakers have already said that they're happy to take questions as they go, so we'll be monitoring those. And having it be a little bit more discussion based in that way rather than just doing all the Q&A at the end. Um, and with that, I'm going to introduce Christine Roeder, who's the lead for the Global Epicenter of Mobility, the GEM initiative, and pass it on to her to get us started. So thanks, Christine, and welcome everybody.
Great, thank you so much. It's really great to see so many names of people that that we've met over the last couple of years through this community practice. And thank you to RTI for hosting this for us to spread, this really great information to the other coalitions and others across the country. So I appreciate the opportunity here. So I want to introduce to you first the what is the Global Epicenter of Mobility? What is GEM? So GEM is the name of what we were able to win through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. We are really focused on the future of mobility in this region. As you all know, Detroit is a region that put the world on wheels, and we still have a very strong and long history here and heritage in the automotive sector. However, as the world is evolving, we definitely have opportunities with other verticals within the mobility sector. So we're really focused on how can we take what we've done over the last several decades here in the Detroit region and be sure that that we're able to apply it to other supply chains and make sure that we have a strong mobility sector for generations to come. So we were awarded, you can go to the next slide. We were awarded $52 million by the EDA for this program with 6 projects that I'll get to in a second. But really it is to help us to accelerate what's going, create stronger connections, which is really what we're talking about today with this social network analysis, to be able to help us to have a strong ecosystem, to, receive investment, be able to talk about what's going on in our region, and make sure that we have the talent and we've got the sites and we've got the ecosystem that's strong to be able to support this for the region to support this industry going forward. So with this money, we have about 25 funded partners through the subrecipients and co-recipient model from the EDA. And these 6 areas are all focused on the future mobility. Next slide. The first that I'll talk about is the one that we're part of here at the Detroit Regional Partnership, which is GEM Central. We were very lucky to get funding to be able to provide some governance to this region. So, Detroit historically and the EDA had told us this. It's like many regions, but us in particular, pretty siloed with the work that we do in all these areas. So GEM Central is in place to really pull all of these organizations together and create a referral system and make sure that they all know what each other is doing with the same client instead of it being a handoff to another organization and they don't really understand what you did with the other organization that was working with you. So GEM Central is helping with making those connections happen. We host convenings regularly. We host the research and data and insights that we provide to all the co-recipients and others from the work that we're doing here. We do all the storytelling. We've got social media. And we're also, the lead. So I'm the RICO for the organization to work with EDA and with the community practice. So we house all that here at the Detroit Regional Partnership. We also house the work that we're doing in site readiness. So many of these mobility companies, when they come to our region or if they're expanding in our region, we're an older, region with a lot of industrial sites, but we don't have a lot of vacancy for new investment. So one of the programs that was funded is to have us be able to prepare ready sites, which is also housed here at the Detroit Regional Partnership. We also have the ecosystem lead for startup and innovation, and that is through our TechTown Detroit Incubator, which is our one-stop in the region for any startups or entrepreneurs looking to find help for their idea in mobility. We also have testing and proving, which is something that is really lacking for startups and for small and mid-sized companies in a lot of ways. So what we were able to do with this money was to work with some of the testing and proving facilities in our region and help them to bring down the cost of allowing these companies to be able to get their product tested. It can be quite expensive and it can be a barrier for them to be able to really develop their technology. So this grant has allowed us to work with some of our testing sites to remove some barriers as well as add some additional technologies to allow for even more testing capabilities. We also have our supply chain transformation program, which, as you all know, this region, I mentioned we're very big on car manufacturing, a lot of engine plants and transmission plants. The powertrain here is very much so, the internal combustion engine. However, we have won some battery plants recently to transition to the electric vehicles. There's a transition that's going to happen for the companies that have been making parts for the internal combustion engine for decades to be able to find other products that they can produce. So this transition is happening through our supply chain transformation center at the University of Michigan, where they're working with these companies, to help them to identify what they can make and be successful and find new customers. And then we have the talent transformation. As you all know, talent is really the currency of economic development, and having talent that's ready to go, that's able to jump in and take on, the new requirements of the job. So we're working with people that are coming into the mobility ecosystem as someone that wants to make that choice to build a career, as well as those that are in career transition. So what kind of certifications do they need? What kind of new training is out there? So really helping to support the training needs, both on the business side as well as the individuals in our region. So those were the 6 projects that we have. We were very lucky and we're very thankful to the EDA to allow us to do this work and to continue. We're about halfway through, like many of you. And one of the really cool things that we were able to do, as I mentioned, is the GEM Central program. And with that, we have got this wonderful research capability that has allowed us to move forward with the social network analysis. And I want to be really honest, when I started in this role and they talked about social network analysis, I thought, like everyone else probably, that this is like analyzing connections on social networks, meaning social media. And I thought, wow, that's really okay. But then to see what it really is and to see what we've been able to discover here in Detroit is really powerful. So I'm gonna go and hand this off next to Angela Ledetto from our team here at the DRP.
Thank you, Christine, and thanks for providing our audience with a great overview of GEM and GEM Central. And good afternoon to all of you who have taken time out of your busy schedules to join us to learn more about what it is that we're doing in Detroit to help transform our legacy automotive industry into a more connected, forward-ready mobility industry. It's really about moving from the motor city to the mobility city. And so our journey with the social network analysis really began during our Build Back Better proposal phase. We were very fortunate to have a couple of members from our coalition who had experience with this and had been able to use this in the workforce development space. And they were really able to share with me and some of the members in our team a vision on how we might use social network analysis to strengthen the connectivity across our mobility sector. As Christine mentioned, our legacy is in light vehicle manufacturing, but this grant is really about uncovering those aspects that are non-automotive related, where we can use that automotive heritage, innovation and legacy work and advanced manufacturing capabilities to really build those hubs in those adjacent sectors. So, and it was really from day one that our team, the GEM Central team, was designed to be that connective tissue across all of the project partners, linking them together, linking the resources, strategies, building strategies together to maximize our regional impact. Additionally, within that spirit and in the alignment of the grant itself, to bring forward bold new approaches that have never been done in our region that would kind of kickstart that transformation and build out of the industry cluster. We chose to go ahead and wrap social network analysis as a deliverable right into our grant proposal. And we put together a really strong metric that said, our work across the 4 years of this grant, we will increase connectivity in the network by 15%. So we thought that was we didn't know where we were starting from, but we thought 15% was a really great goal. One little quick note I wanna just make here before we dive into is that the social network analysis tool is a very versatile and robust and powerful tool that will help any ecosystem make intentional shifts. So what Megan is going to walk you through a little bit later is just one approach to how the social network analysis tool can be used. Next slide, please. So as Christine mentioned, these are the partners that we chose to lead our 6 projects across the coalition. And what we found during our early discussions is that each of these 6 program partners were doing very important and impactful work, even before we got together to talk about how we work collectively through the grant period. But they were largely operating independently of each other. We weren't really connected and aligned in our work quite yet. And today, all 6 of these program partners are operating under a definition on mobility that was created collectively. And that definition is the multidimensional movement of people and goods, along with the products, materials, processes, and technologies supported. So it's a very broad mobility definition. We also had this vision to bring greater alignment and impact through the application and our no wrong door approach, which was really a framework to help us move from a fragmented network to a truly connected ecosystem. And the goal there really was the approach that no matter where an entity or a person enters into one of these programs, that they would get immediately connected to the right resources at the right time, and that it be a seamless approach. And so, as Christine mentioned, it's really GEM Central's role to be that day-to-day dot connector convener, and in making sure that information's flowing easily across the network, gaps are closed, collaboration becomes the norm, and not the exception. Next slide, please. And so if we go one layer deeper than where our GEM partners sit across the region, we have over 400 assets and resources that support our mobility ecosystem. And this does not include our industry. We have over 2,000 companies in this region alone that's kind of work in this space. But these are all the resources like the accelerators and the incubators and the testing and proving facilities and our workforce development agencies that kind of just support that industry here. But what we realize is like this map is great at showcasing and talking to us about the exceptionally dense concentration of resources that we have and where those are located. And this map tells us that they're located, the closer you get to the city of Detroit, there's a great concentration there, and along the Ann Arbor U of M corridor, and then up around Flint, where there's Kettering University as well. But what it doesn't tell us, and this is really the heart of the social network analysis, is that it doesn't tell us how these entities are working together. It doesn't show us exactly who's connected to whom or whether they're even aware of each other's offerings or services. We can't tell how efficient the flow of information is, how easy it is, how difficult it is. How are companies navigating through the different processes of their business cycle if they need a site location or testing and proving facility or just some startup entrepreneurial kind of support as well. It doesn't tell us how our GEM partners are working with these resources as well. We don't know. We wanted to know, like, are we missing any influencers or highly connected people that we don't have currently working with us in the coalition? And we don't necessarily see the silos and the gaps. So the social network analysis is helping us uncover how well is the ecosystem functioning, so that we can be really intentional about where we can help connect some of those dots, align our efforts, and foster stronger collaboration region-wide. Next slide, please. The other thing that's really, really cool and really great about this tool is that it's actionable. And with our research, we really believe that behind every single data point is a person, and that person has a story. And we believe if we can use data in a thoughtful way, we can build lasting systems that change lives for the better. And social network analysis helps us do that because we can see those spaces a little bit better. So our goal was to map the mobility ecosystem in a visual, measurable way and to track how our connections evolve over the life of the grant. We wanted to use this data to uncover both the strengths and the gaps and the insights that would allow us to design very intentional programs that strengthen the ecosystem overall. But one of the most exciting outcomes of this work was the creation of 8 pilot programs that we created with Megan's group, and they were our immersive learning labs, and where we intentionally paired an organization that kind of was sitting on the periphery with one of those organizations that was more centrally connected. And you'll hear about 2 of those efforts in a few minutes from Megan. But our ultimate goal at the end of the day was to widen access and opportunity to every single one of the 348 communities that are served by this grant and representing over the 5.4 million people that reside within our region. So next slide. So that brings me to introducing our incredible partner in this work, Megan Kennedy and her team at Orange Sparkleball. We selected Orange Sparkleball through the competitive EDA compliant RFP process, where we received approximately 5 or 6 proposals from firms that do this type of work across the United States. And we even received one from Canada, which was kind of an interesting insight. But OSB's proposal really stood out. It was extremely thoughtful, highly visual, and they went that extra step to bring that action-oriented process to us. So they actually are helping us with the immersion labs that are building really intentional connections across the network. Every single one of Megan's team members is a true change engine, and we could not be more thrilled to have them on this journey. And so with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Megan Kennedy to walk through the actual results of the analysis.
Angela, thank you so much. I was smiling that whole time. That was very sweet. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. This presentation, Mapping Connections to Spark Innovation in Detroit's Advanced Mobility Ecosystem, is a result of that partnership that Angela was just talking about with GEM. And we really wanted to understand how the Detroit region's mobility ecosystem is evolving, and really more importantly, how to drive that transformation. Next slide, please. Awesome. At Orange Sparkle Ball, our approach is holistic. We're looking at all the elements that drive an ecosystem toward change. And we've been working with Terry Garska from the Social Innovation Lab at the University of Kansas to do a deep dive in understanding how ecosystem structure drives the regional outcomes we all want. Terry brings deep expertise in how people, places, and systems interact. Together, we're measuring the connections that fuel innovation in Detroit's mobility space. Next slide, please. So first, what is social network analysis and why does it matter? You can see I have social in brackets here, and Christine kind of alluded a little bit to this. When they see social, most people really think mistakenly that we're talking about analyzing Facebook data or maybe LinkedIn data or something like that. That is not what we're doing at all. Next slide, please. So what are we really doing? Social network analysis, or I may say SNA for short, is one of the most powerful tools in understanding ecosystems. So at its core, SNA is a way to measure and visualize relationships between organizations or people specifically. I'm going to use the word ecosystem a lot over the next little while. By that, I mean a complex network or interconnected system. So specifically here, we're talking about the group of organizations supporting the Detroit region mobility work. So with SNA, think of it as a tool for making the invisible visible. You can see who's working together, who isn't, and where the opportunities for connection and then really intervention lie. Next slide, please. Why does this matter? Because building a strong ecosystem isn't just about launching new programs. It's about connecting dots, and that's between organizations, across sectors, and people to drive shared outcomes. SNA is how we measure and understand if our ecosystem building efforts are successful and really guide those future interventions. So SNA allows us to see if our work is successful and plan where to focus next. Next slide. So what do we know about networks and how they impact outcomes? I'm going to focus on a few examples of how this approach has been used in economic and community development before we get into the GEM specific data. Next slide. First, let's look at economic development. Before we dive into characteristics of different types of ecosystems, I want to touch on why we're so focused on innovation ecosystems. Christine and Angela have both talked about innovation ecosystems. I will talk a lot about them. Innovation has long been seen as a driver of economic growth. But then how do we move toward an ecosystem that fosters innovation? What characteristics do innovation ecosystems have? So we know from research from Japan that compared traditional manufacturing ecosystems, and specifically they compared automotive, in this case, with innovation ecosystems. Traditional manufacturing ecosystems are tightly connected. Working relationships between organizations are often the result of a contractual relationship where there are few external partners collaborating. Think of this as an auto manufacturer with their set supply chain. In contrast, an innovation ecosystem looks different than that. They're more fluid, more cross-sector, and more dynamic. In innovation ecosystems, information and ideas flow freely throughout the ecosystem. The ecosystem acts more like a platform rather than a rigid structure. This allows for the ability to adapt as change happens. And these two structures are really quite different. Next slide. Now I want to take a look just for a second at what we know from community networks. Our colleague Terry Garska found that stronger networks help communities respond to challenges and stay more coordinated, ultimately driving resilience. Her research shows that robustly connected communities experience better community level outcomes over time. These highly connected communities could respond more quickly to threats or opportunities, stay coordinated, and ultimately reduce harm. So stronger cross-sector connections help protect communities and position them to adapt and thrive. Okay, next slide. Now that we know that network structure is key, both in economic development and community development, let's take a look at the GEM ecosystem. So how is GEM using SNA? SNA allows GEM to do 4 things. They can identify key organizations, or I will often call them influencers, in the network. They can map connections to reveal hidden patterns and relationships. They can guide ecosystem building strategy by showing where to strengthen partnerships that already exist, but might be more effective if they were stronger. And then finally, they can use data to improve their decision-making. Next slide. Okay, let's get into the analysis. We define the GEM ecosystem as all the organizations that came together to form the coalition that supported the original grant application. Some of these organizations were part of the core group of funded organizations that you heard Christine talk about. And some were part of a greater group of organizations that became part of the GEM coalition. In other words, the supportive ecosystem. So let's look at the GEM network data. In can you go back? Sorry. Thank you. In 2023, we mapped 155 organizations that were those original coalition organizations, and those organizations had 7,300 connections. That means that the 155 organizations were connected to other organizations 7,300 times. So obviously, each organization has multiple connections in the ecosystem. Each time we collected data, we also asked participating respondents to suggest additional organizations that they felt were key to supporting the mobility ecosystem. So by 2024, that number of ecosystem organizations had grown to 184, and those 184 organizations had 7,800 connections. Next slide. So in 2024, this is what the network looks like. Each circle is an organization, and lines between circles indicate one of those connections between the organizations that I just mentioned. We measured connections using a research scale where respondents could note their organization's relationship to other organizations. The lowest level of connection was just awareness, where they were aware of another organization. They also could go to whether their organization had kind of informally collaborated with the other organization. And then the highest level of connection was that legal agreement that we talked about as indicative of kind of a traditional manufacturing ecosystem, things like contracts between organizations. We really wanted to understand the nature of the connection. So let's look more deeply at this network map. Organization, will you go back? Thank you. Organizations that are colored circles are core GEM funded organizations, those organizations that were part of those projects Christine talked about. And each GEM organization is color coded based on which of the cross-sector pillars or those projects in the GEM initiative they belong to. Gray circles show organizations from that greater coalition that was assembled for the grant that I talked about earlier. We can also understand organizational influence from this network map. The larger the circle, the more influence the organization has in the mobility ecosystem. You'll notice that several of the GEM organizations, the colored circles, are highly influential in the network. But you'll also notice that there are some highly influential organizations in gray who are not core to the GEM initiative. These are highly influential organizations from the greater coalition. And when we talk about influence, we mean that these organizations are connected to, or they are the connecting point between other organizations that may not be connected otherwise. And why does this matter? This means that these organizations are able to access information and have the ability to distribute it to impact the network. They consistently and reliably know about things like funding sources or policy changes or even RFPs being released. Next slide. Okay, now let's pare the network map down to just the core GEM funded organizations. This is what the GEM network looks like in 2024. These funded organizations are heavily connected after almost 2 years of working together on the initiative. They're heavily connected across pillars, as you can see. And using the size of the organization circles, you can see some GEM organizations have a lot of influence in the mobility ecosystem. So several of the core GEM organizations are really driving the ecosystem. Next slide. All right, I know this looks like a lot, but we're going to get through it. This is looking at the same data, but in a really different way. And this is really the heart of the story. So here in this bar chart, each organization in the ecosystem is represented by a line. The higher the bar, the more influence the organization has in the ecosystem. And the color of the bar indicates the types of connections each organization has to other ecosystem organizations, with the strength of the connection increasing from light gray at the bottom to dark blue. Dark blue indicates that contractual relationship, which if you remember was our strongest measure. So what does this mean? In 2023, after less than a year of GEM work, influence in the GEM network was clustered to the left of this bar chart. So you see that sort of cliff-looking thing on the left. A few organizations, the ones on the left, were doing the heavy lifting in the ecosystem. These organizations were connected to most other organizations in the network, and the influence in the network was centralized with them. So they were really holding the network. Next slide, please. Let's contrast this with what we're seeing now. So this was the 2024 measure. By 2024, we were seeing a shift. Influence became more evenly distributed. You don't see that core group of organizations clustered to the left, but instead the height of the lines is sort of sloping down, which indicates that some of that influence that had been clustered in 2023 on the left is now being distributed throughout the ecosystem. The network has become more open. As we talked about earlier, the pattern innovation ecosystems follow is one of openness, which allows ideas and information to flow throughout the ecosystem. This new shape signals an ecosystem in transition, likely a transition from a manufacturing model to a more innovation-driven one. This data on how organizations are working together is often not at all visible, but provides valuable insights that are then actionable. We'll provide a few examples of how GEM has made these insights actionable in just a bit. Next slide. We also looked at network metrics to understand the structure of the network, how strong connections are, how many exist, how influential they are. I won't go deep into these metrics, but what we saw over time was that the average number of connections decreased across the ecosystem. In other words, the ecosystem was becoming more decentralized and loose. However, at the same time, and this is the important part, we saw that the average influence each organization had increased, as did the influence of their connections. So while we're seeing a looser network, more decentralized, we're also seeing distributed influence in the network. So these metrics support what we saw visually on the previous slides. This reinforces our hypothesis that what we're seeing is real-time evolution of this ecosystem. Next slide. We also want to note just a couple additional findings. Despite our measurement targeting all those organizations that had formed the original coalition at the very beginning of the grant, corporate participation was low, indicating that private sector engagement and data collection is lagging. And we wanted to understand more about Detroit region mobility leadership. Nearly 40% of responding organizations reported being owned or led by individuals not traditionally represented in leadership roles. Okay, next slide. So let's go back to the idea of making this data actionable that I talked about earlier. and Angela also mentioned. Using network analysis and measuring the ecosystem change over time allows us to use data to actively identify how to grow and sustain the GEM ecosystem, particularly as we start to see a shift in the ecosystem over time. Let's look at some actionable growth opportunities derived from the data to understand how to continue to take action to drive this transformation. Next slide. So we're seeing a shift in the ecosystem. Influence, and then with it, information pathways is more distributed. We're seeing indications of a transformational shift in ecosystem structure. We believe that traditional manufacturing structure is evolving to a pattern that resembles more of an innovation ecosystem. So how do we continue to push that transformation? Because that's really what we know will drive growth. What is an actionable growth strategy based on what we're seeing? We need to keep building informal cross-sector collaborations. These connections are where the information flow between groups really sparks that continued growth. Next slide. Second, we continue to see organizations that are not part of the core GEM funded initiative, but have considerable influence in the ecosystem, even despite this network shift we're seeing. So what actionable growth strategy might we take based on this information? Proactively engaging those influential organizations outside the core GEM funded groups, especially those not traditionally seen as mobility actors, like maybe foundations who are funding community initiatives, provides opportunities to expand collaboration, unlock new funding stream, and really diversify the ecosystem. Next slide. Remember, our ecosystem was defined by the original coalition of organizations that signed on to support the grant. So despite having opted in to support the grant, private organizations were less likely to engage with our data collection. So intentionally working to re-engage the original private sector players will help support a broad range of mobility initiatives, not just automotive, but logistics, electric vehicles or EVs, infrastructure, drone technologies, and many more. And then finally, next slide, sorry. And then finally, 40% of our respondents reported their organization leadership reflects a broader spectrum of American life, those not traditionally seen in leadership pipelines. How do we continue to drive that? We can intentionally design pathways into mobility leadership for a broad spectrum of leaders whose experiences reflect and serve Detroit's unique needs. And we can invest in leadership development for mobility adjacent groups whose work intersects with mobility but may sit outside traditional leadership pipelines. These are examples of approaches to building leadership pathways for those who reflect Detroit's future, not just its past. Next slide. I also want to talk about 2 case studies to show how we are using the data to intentionally connect organizations that had previously not been part of the GEM ecosystem. These involve strategically bringing in a new player to collaborate with an existing influential organization. And this is what Angela mentioned earlier as well. Next slide. Let me share 2 brief examples of what this looks like in action. So the first example is an economic development opportunity to commercialize new technologies. In this, a regional tech transfer program was connected to GEM test sites and Michigan's economic development resources. As a result, several groups, including a startup that is a standout right now in the Detroit region, Mott, were able to utilize test sites and further their product development. This has opened up another avenue for bringing technology out of universities and into real-world testing, even opening a pathway to bring out-of-state researchers into GEM proving and testing sites in the Detroit region. And this continues to be a fruitful connection. Next slide. Now I want to focus on a community development opportunity that provides a low barrier pathway into the mobility ecosystem. In this, a STEAM nonprofit partnered with an industrial properties group to develop a drone curriculum that could tailor student learning to the type of footage needed for those industrial properties. Students are now getting paid hands-on experience learning to film industrial properties while earning commercial drone licenses. This creates that low barrier into the mobility ecosystem while producing footage needed by the group managing the industrial sites. This partnership has been widely highlighted in the ecosystem as an example of a partnership where both organizations are getting unique value from the collaboration. Next slide.
Megan, we have a
Yes,
question from the audience, so I popped back on.
awesome.
The question is, how can one utilize social network analysis to interpret the dynamics of academic industry partnerships, industry collaborations, emergence of charging infrastructure providers, and technology firms within the electric mobility ecosystem?
Wow, that was a
That's a
lot.
big question. Yeah. Can I repeat it for you? You think you got the
Uh,
gist?
I'm going to do a broad brushstroke, and if you feel like I haven't gotten it, I am happy to go again. And I also would refer the questioner to the Q&A at the end, where my colleagues will come on, and I'm sure they could do actually a deep dive into the statistics if that's the direction the question's going. But really, it doesn't matter what the ecosystem is. So I talked about economic development example of using social network analysis, and I talked about a community example of using social network analysis. So understanding how the players in whatever ecosystem or community are interacting allows you, it basically gives you a visualization into who's not being pulled in. I don't know if in the network analysis graphic that we showed, the network map, you could see there were some small kind of players that were maybe connected by one line. So they're sort of really on the periphery of the ecosystem, and say maybe that was a player with a very specific training program for workforce development, and you thought we really need to pull them more broadly or more strongly into the ecosystem. You could then intentionally design collaborations that would pull their skill set into the ecosystem so that that information was more broadly accessible. So that's my high level answer, but we can definitely dive in, and I will punt that to my colleagues. But thank you. And I'm going to go back to this, but please, if that was not a satisfactory answer, please do speak up in the Q&A. So we're really excited about the possibility. Oh, next slide. Sorry. We're really excited about the possibilities opened up by this type of research and are working to get the findings more broadly disseminated. This is not a widely used approach to aid in ecosystem building, and GEM is really a leader in how it's using social network analysis to understand their ecosystem and then turn this research into action to connect organizations within the ecosystem. Next slide. We recently published the initial data from 2023 in the Journal of Urban Mobility. If you'd like more information, there's a QR code that will take you to the journal article. And our goal will be to continue to publish so that the approach is more widely disseminated. Next slide. Okay, so what does this longitudinal, so right now we have 2 years of data, help us understand about innovation ecosystems and how the GEM ecosystem is evolving. Next slide. What we're seeing is a shift from a closed hierarchical system to an open innovation ecosystem. Remember that research from Japan I touched on earlier? We're seeing the characteristics of the ecosystem shift. That type of network structure leads to a greater flow of information throughout the ecosystem, as well as decentralized influence among the organizations. So in that example I just talked about pulling that organization in, what we would be intentionally doing is pulling their knowledge base more securely into the ecosystem. And that is, we are able to do that because we want to kind of harness that flow of information so that everyone benefits from it. Next slide. Information no longer flows through a small group of influential organizations. So in that instance, if that organization had only been connected to maybe one of those more influential organizations in the chart I showed, the earlier one, their information would have been centralized there. But when you distribute the information throughout the ecosystem, it's easier for that information to flow. So like in that first graphic I showed, the influential organizations were all clustered together, and that sort of holds the information. What we're seeing now is organizations connecting directly, which fosters new partnerships and collaborations. All of these characteristics are central to innovation ecosystems, which, as we talked about earlier, we know drive growth. Next slide. Okay, if you'll hang with me for one more data thing, we're going to be good. It's really exciting to be able to watch this evolution year over year at the organizational level, which this network data allows us to do. As we saw those results, we wanted to see if what we were seeing at the organizational level is being reflected in other data at the regional level. So we have organizational level data, so let's look one layer up at the regional level. We wanted to validate the findings we are seeing. This will be a bigger undertaking, but we have initial information here. So first, recently released jobs data showed that automotive jobs in the region have declined. However, the more expansive definition of mobility jobs, including EVs, those electric vehicles I talked about earlier, autonomous systems and supporting technology are growing. These mobility roles often involve a broader range of technologies and ones that are applicable across industries. So that finding mirrors what we're seeing, a move to an innovation ecosystem. And then internally at Orange Sparkle Ball, we analyze startup data to get an indication of where technology is moving. We know that startups whose data can be captured using a database called Crunchbase are at the leading edge of technology innovation. So we also did a very preliminary analysis of startup data in the Detroit region. Between 2015 and 2019, and remember, these are leading indicators, regional startups describing themselves using the term mobility grew by nearly 24%, while those describing themselves as automotive declined over that same period. Both of these types of data measure far different things than we measured with the network analysis. However, they both support a shift from automotive, where we know the ecosystem has very specific and more closed pattern, to mobility, which encompasses a broad range of technologies. These both support what we are seeing at the organizational level in our network analysis, namely a transformational shift in the Detroit region mobility ecosystem. All right, next slide. So what's next? Next slide. This fall, we'll complete another round of GEM ecosystem measurement, allowing us to continue to track these trends longitudinally. We also see opportunities to further combine this data with other types of data from the region. We want to see if the structure of this ecosystem predicts outcomes, much like our colleague Terry saw in the community development work she's done. For example, does this changing structure allow us to predict outcomes at a regional level? All of this will allow us to more fully understand Detroit's mobility future. Next slide. Thank you for being here. I want to call out my colleagues, Terry and Michaela, who have been central to this work. Please connect with us. The QR codes take you to our LinkedIn, or feel free to email. And as I said, we'll have questions in a bit and can do a deep dive in any of this. But first, we talked about how GEM is using this data, and Angela talked about this a little bit, but data to help you understand how organizations are working together and the relationships in your ecosystem can be used in a multitude of ways. Social network analysis is a tool that will help you gain deep insights at the organizational level, as opposed to the community and regional level where most data sits, into what's happening, and then intentionally shape your ecosystem toward the goals that you want to see in your communities. So with that, I will hand things back to Christine to close out.
Thanks, Megan. And again, that was an incredible amount of information on something that is not regularly talked about. I am really thrilled with the outcomes of the first two rounds of this, to see just how this study is helping to inform the work that we're doing and helping us to understand where these connections are. And really what's really exciting for us here in Detroit is this discovery through this, that we are transitioning from what our heritage has been, which has been very fully manufacturing, into more of an innovation ecosystem, which is something that we're happy to see, because we know that while we'll hold on to the manufacturing heritage, to know that we are, looking more like a region that is able to support, innovators and what comes with all of that. So really excited to be able to do this again in a few months for the third round and see what things may change. But thank you, Megan. Thank you, Angela, for your overviews. And also I want to thank again the EDA for their support. Without the funding through Build Back Better, this kind of work would not be able to have been done. So again, very appreciative to the EDA for seeing this as something that is important for our region to understand ourselves better and fund it through this program. So I want to appreciate that. Any other, I know there's questions. So Jessica, I'm gonna hand it to you to see if you want to cover those.
Thanks, Christine. Just emerged back into the, the ether. I'm going to ask any panelists from the Detroit regional team to go ahead and turn their cameras on as we get ready to launch into Q&A. But I also just want to say thank you. That was really informational and very just cutting edge. It was really neat. Something that struck me is that this was a goal of y'all's from the get-go, and how this has really helped you to measure that work. I think a lot of times this type of work, connection, everyone knows is so important. And it's the thing that sometimes doesn't get funded or doesn't get attention because it's hard to measure. And so just being able to see and track that, I think is really valuable. So just very exciting. Just also very cool to see that seamless approach that kind of captures people no matter how they enter the ecosystem, and just how thorough that is. That was really exciting. We have a few questions from the audience, and then I encourage people to continue submitting them through the Q&A. So I'll just get started, and I think, whoever from the team would like to jump in, go ahead and jump in, and if we need to jockey a little bit, that's okay. So the first question I want to ask is, does the history of intentional moments of collaboration that maybe failed in the region previously, did that bring wisdom to GEM's goal-oriented solution to this project? And that's growing between, for example, Michigan Central and Ann Arbor, and et cetera. So I think maybe the Detroit team is probably well suited to answer that question. Let me know if I should repeat.
I'm not sure if anyone else wants to jump in, but I can say that what we're seeing with our innovation districts, we have several that are really under construction here. We have physical centers of innovation that are being constructed, and then we also have this new energy that we're tracking through this work through GEM. So the partnership with the University of Michigan and Michigan Central, which for those of you that don't know, is Ford Motor Company's investment in an old train station that they've recently restored and now are housing it's an incubator for mobility, as well as some Ford Motor Company employees that are housed there. We're part of that. We work with the folks at Michigan Central. We work with Ann Arbor is in our region. So we work with the Ann Arbor Economic Development Group. We work with the University of Michigan. University of Michigan is funded through 2 of our GEM subrecipient and co-recipient grants. So really I would say that is a big part of what we're doing and what we're measuring. And we're trying to track all of it. I don't think that this is because of failures in the past. I think it's more that this is an organic expansion of what's happening here. but I'll let others answer as well. Some other thoughts?
Thanks, Christine. I'll just give folks just two. I'll start reading the next one. If anyone wants to tag on, just interrupt me. All right, so another question from our audience is, what are some other tactics and strategies that have been used by communities to strengthen the connectivity overall of their ecosystem? That's maybe for you, Megan, or anybody, but some examples from other communities that you can speak to that are concrete and how they've used your work in the future.
I'm gonna jump in there, and then I'm gonna actually punt to Terry to talk just a couple sentences about her work that's in community development, because it's a very specific thing. I think this is Kevin's question. Jessica, were you paraphrasing it?
Maybe.
Okay,
I'm not sure if it
awesome.
was Kevin's. I didn't see, but if you saw it, probably is.
Got it. The question is like, how do you get very specific about building connectivity? And I want to highlight, if it is Kevin's question, if it's not, I'm putting him on the spot a little bit. Kevin is from Design Core. One of the things that I know he has done has been intentionally building collaborative projects with other groups. So for example, one of the collaborative projects he built was between Design Core and a group called Youth Tank. And they did a series, and I'm going to kind of not do a great job on this, but they did a series of sprints around mobility. And that's a perfect example of more than just talk to people, but it's not a heavy lift like a contractual relationship, but you're providing that sort of first exposure. You think as a youth organization, obviously, first exposure to the mobility ecosystem. And I think that's a really good and relatively low lift example of something that's super actionable. So Kevin, I hope I didn't just call you out. Terry, do you want to just say a couple of sentences about the community development work you're doing that's very concrete?
Well, first I will say, I think the types of immersive innovation labs that OSB has been doing within GEM are exactly the type of strategic design interventions that accomplish more than just talking to people. It's that shared problem solving. It's bringing people to the table to actually solve something that they both care about. And that tends to strengthen an informal relationship into something more formal. So I would suggest that those particular strategies that the immersive innovation lab are the types of things that we're talking about. Those are pretty concrete, and so I don't have much to add than keep on keeping on to that.
Can I add something to that as well? So I'm Janine, and I'm responsible for like the connectivity, but my lens is very much community. And Megan talked about kind of the data up here, and then the next level, which would be the social network and the coalition. But there's another level there when you think about regional economic development and place-based work. It's the community. And so, this social network analysis to me, and what I saw really was who's not even on the board, like who's not even considered here, right? And so the opportunity to be very intentional around organizations like a youth tank. We've done many of those things here in our region. And it's like those people that don't even know about this advanced mobility ecosystem, like they're not even connected in, but they're assets within our community, and we need them in order to be successful. So how do we look at those who have been perhaps historically excluded, right? In regions, just throughout this big region, outside of Detroit or even inside of Detroit, and how do we bring them in with intentionality? So I think that this network analysis shows that as well. And these innovative labs show you the way to do it. And so I think that's one of the big pieces we're taking away from this as well.
Thanks, y'all. We're really running low on time, but I would like to just be able to ask another question from the chat, and then I guess we'll close out. From Thomas in the chat, one of your slides depicted different levels of engagement culminating in contracts. What role does GEM play at that level between ecosystem players?
Janine, do you want to grab that? Yeah.
Go ahead, Christine.
Okay, so I think that that is something that's being measured through the survey, through the SNA. Some of that is happening organically through the opportunities that perhaps we are providing through the connections that we're making. We aren't necessarily doing matchmaking for contracts, but we are connecting organizations and companies and people together because we have this opportunity to hold convenings and have have our newsletters and other things that we do that is creating stronger connections between these organizations and beyond those funded organizations. So while we're tracking it, it's not necessarily something that Janine and Bernard and I are, and Angela are, out saying we're going to take this company and connect it to that, and they're going to have, a customer relationship. But it is something that the more that happens, the stronger our ecosystem is. So.
Awesome. Well, I hate that we're out of time. We don't have more time for questions. Well, I want to thank everyone who has joined, all the participants, and for being just so engaged in the chat and Q&A. And I especially want to thank the Detroit team and the Orange Sparkle Ball team, Christine, Megan, Angela, Rebecca, Terry, Michaela, Bernard, Janine, and Marissa on our team for helping to manage all their AV and tech needs. This is part of our emerging practice series at the Community of Practice. And so if you're not on our listserv, I would encourage you, I think Marissa put a link in the chat to our website. You can join our listserv. You can reach out to us to get connected to anyone on the Detroit team, or if anyone on the Detroit team would like to, share their information. I know that Megan and yours team's information was in some of the slides with the QR code. And so we'll be posting this webinar online. We'll also be posting the slides. And so keep a lookout for that. And thank you all very much. And have a wonderful afternoon.